Welcome back. What is it? Season 11?
Season 11. It's been a long road to get here, and now we're at the end of history.
I'm actually going to pull up. So we have new tiers. Everything's a lot cheaper now. We got an extra Pokemon. So the point system is a little creative. We're able to do a lot more than we were last time. And overall, I think that it led to some really busted teams.
Yeah, if you guys, just compare these to some of our previous teams. They all look amazing.
Right. So, um, what else is new? We got new Pokemon with the DLC.
Hmm.
Um, a lot
New
of new
moves.
defensive Pokemon, which is nice. Yeah, new moves.
Hmm.
What do you think about the new moves?
I I think they're really fun. Um, I have some favorites in there, obviously. And I think that there are potentially some Pokemon that we mistiered because we didn't fully understand like the implications of a new move.
Yeah,
So maybe we'll see in certain drafts Pokemon that were maybe undervalued, uh, and that we'll probably recommend changing tiers for next time.
yeah, probably. I think we tried to do the most obvious ones and tier them up. I think we missed some of them. I think the biggest miss was Rillaboom. Um, I think that
Yep.
Pokemon's at least 180. It might be in the top tier, honestly. Um, but anyway, we can talk about that more when it gets
What's your
to.
favorite new move?
Oh, I think that Scorching Sands could have some good draft league implications. I think that um, probably Poltergeist could also be a cool draft league um, move. I think those are probably my two favorites of the new moves.
Yeah, I love both of those. Poltergeist, especially with showing the item, I
Yeah,
think has a lot of utility in Draft League in particular.
yeah, I agree.
I also think Flip Turn is really fun.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Um, I'm really excited about that one. It gives Pokemon like we'll see in some of these drafts, but like Vaporeon and
Yeah,
like Keldeo, some
Milotic, a
yeah,
lot of Pokemon that people would already draft got access to Flip Chart.
yeah.
So that's cool.
I, I think those are my three favorite.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
it'll be cool to just see who does what, because I do think some of them might not be that great, but the fact that they're new might mean that people try to bring them. So I'm excited to just see what people decide to do.
Yeah, I hope we see the new move. That's one of the fun things, or one of the balances of adding new Pokemon and new moves is how do you make them not busted, but fun so people want to use them.
Exactly.
Um, so, I also really like Triple Axle. I think that's a really fun move.
That's the ice one.
Yep.
Cool. Well, I think that we that's all we need to do for an intro, unless there's anything else we need to talk about. I guess first of all, I'd like to thank everyone that did a tier list already. Um, Not only was it cool to see, but it would also help me analyze some of the teams based on how other people rated them. And also, I think you probably all noticed, those that did it, that it makes it a lot easier um, to have your own grasp of the league and of the draft when you do your own sort of assessment. But at least now you get Adam and my assessment as well.
Yeah, I agree. And one more thing that I wanted to say before we move on to the first team is that I think, and maybe I'd be curious to hear you chime in on this too. But I think that this draft was very difficult for me to evaluate immediately afterwards.
Yeah.
Just looking at the teams because there were a lot of teams that I looked at, Like Sean's is on the screen right now. So I looked at Sean's team and I was like, this is so busted.
Right.
I've just kept going between teams, like Connor's team. I was like, this is so busted.
Yeah.
The Braviaries team. So it was difficult to like look at all these teams and because we've been doing these analysis videos, we've been playing in the league for almost 3 years now, and so we have kind of a level that we expect a good draft to be at. And I think all of these teams are above, you know, what like a Gen 7 good draft would be,
I think so too.
or almost all. And so it's a little bit difficult to evaluate. And you maybe my first intuition was not necessarily correct for all these teams. And so I think I had to like mentally raise the bar for each team and say, okay, yes, this is a good draft, obviously, but now that everybody has a busted draft,
Yeah.
like
What is the
now,
new good?
what is the new good? So I think that's something that we'll talk about with these teams. I'd be curious to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I think that with more appropriate tiering, like we have this time, I think it adds to a lot more utility in those low tier picks. Because if it's not the middle tier, then the other draft just had the traditional style, just had one below middle tier and then the worst Pokemon. And now there's like a lot of gray between middle tier and the worst Pokemon. And so things like Lycanroc midday for 80 points have a good role on Galar United's team or Sigalith or Hitmonchan. I think the low tiers especially win out for your team and then make your team more well rounded because your low tiers only have to do what you need them to do. So they cost only that much.
Right, you're not paying extra, quote, extra because it has multiple utilities if you
Right.
only need one.
Exactly. So
Right.
yeah, I think I went through and like rated them all and then had to go back through and go, okay, I originally gave the first 19 I don't know, I gave all of them A pluses and then I was like, okay, no, I gotta now relook at the teams now that I have a good understanding more. So the if I gave my first impression list, it would look largely nothing like my final one. And even now, I'm only like, okay, so now it's July 1st. We started drafting basically a week ago. And I've already helped some people team build for their first week. I already had my first batch. So um, I didn't want to adjust my rankings too much now. I still wanted it to be like a post draft tier list.
Hmm. Yeah, and I actually just made my tier list before this video because I've been having so much trouble kind of ranking these teams. And
Right.
so I think that what I tried to do was rank them just like top to bottom and then kind of decide after that which tier they belonged in.
Right.
Um, I don't know. I don't know if we succeeded, but I guess we'll see. You guys will
Yeah.
have to let us know in the comments.
And my draft was a little bit different. Or how I ranked my teams. I basically went through and I gave each team a grade from S to A to down below A, and um, after I gave every um, team a grade, then I ranked them among that grade. So there are some teams where I really like them and I would love to use them. Um, and that are maybe ranked B plus, um, that I actually like more than some of my A minus teams, but it's because I chose to give them a grade and then rank them. But we'll go on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're gonna go in draft order. So the first team up is you, Kyle.
Yeah, let me go. Let me just pull up the teams like
I
this. Can
think
you
it'll
see
look a
that?
little nicer. I can. Any way we can get. Oh, perfect. Yep, get them
Cool.
all on the screen at the same time. Okay, so uh, maybe this is. unusual, but I have the benefit of hindsight of a match that Kyle and I played earlier today. Uh, so I got to face this team, and I already team built against this team, and I did that before I ranked it. So maybe that's coloring my view of this a little bit. So I just want to point out, obviously, Kyle's running sand here with Excadrill T-Tar, and then with possibly the best Pokemon in the format, Dragapult. So a really solid top core, like top three. You got some Regenerator Pokemon. Arcanine and Rotom-Mow are great pivots. Arcanine now gets Teleport, apparently. So
Did
that's
you know that
terrible.
going into our game?
I did not know that good. I maybe should have known.
So
I
you
maybe,
just saw Arcanine get really thin and shoot into the sky.
yeah, I just sighed and I said, you know what? I should have expected that there's something busted about this Pokemon that I didn't know. So, not bust. Intimidate onto a physical attacker and then teleport away. Oh my gosh, how terrible. Um, so yeah, so I think this team is great. I think we have seen a sand team before. I pulled up Collins season 7 sand team, and we were looking at that and comparing it to this. And actually, this team doesn't look so busted compared to Collins' team, except that Dragapult is a lot better than any third Pokemon Colin was able to pick. He'd maybe Gengar, but I think Dragapult is much more versatile and a lot better than Gengar. Um, but in that team, I also got to see the results, and the result was Colin mostly used Togekiss and didn't have a lot of sweeping success with
Yeah.
Excadrill T-Tar. Um, and I think that, well, we'll see. I think Sand is better than I think it is. So I don't really know how much better it is. Um, but Kyle, you maybe had up a list earlier of Pokemon with a higher attack stat in Draft League
Oh, I
or
can pull that
that
back
are
up.
legal.
Yeah.
Yeah, than Excadrill. It's not very many. It's like 5 Pokemon.
Yeah, in our
It's like,
league, let me look at sort by attack. Obviously, there's like Azu and Marowak and Diggersby, who aren't included on this list because their attack stat is based on their ability or held item. But it goes Haxorus, Conkeldurr, Darmanitan, Rhyperior. And then the next highest attack at 135 is Excadrill.
yeah. So it's very good. Um, I think I've always looked at it and seen how frail it was and seen its speed tier and said, you know what? It's frail. It has a low speed tier. Like um, it's not actually that good. It's not really worth it tier one in our previous format. And I think after prepping for it, um, anyway, Steel is just a good defensive typing, and 110 HP is kind of a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and if every team has a Rotom, then Mold Breaker is so good for Excadrill to have at that speed tier. Now, force that Excadrill to run Jolly every week, but still. Um, anyway, all that to say, I think this is a good draft. A couple things that I want to say about it that I maybe some criticisms. So I see not so many hazard options. So you have
Yeah.
Excadrill, which is an excellent rocker. Also Sand Slash.
And
And am I?
Tyranitar.
Oh, and Tyranitar. Okay,
But
that's
they're all
fine.
three weak to water and grass moves. Like they all share weaknesses. Actually, not grass for Excadrill, but yeah, they all can be maybe countered in similar ways.
Right. And you have Rotom as a defogger, Excadrill with Rapid Spin, Sand Slash with Rapid Spin. So it's not so few hazard removal options, but it just feels like Excadrill's doubled up. Like you really want to run offense on it, but it's also your best rocker and your best hazard removal.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
Rotom-Mow, you'd love to run Will-O-Wisp, and T-Wave, or like Will-O-Wisp and Nasty Plot, but you can't do that and Defog.
Right.
So I think that is a criticism that I have of this team.
Hmm.
Um, Otherwise, I think it's really good. I think Porygon's bad. I don't. There's no reason to ever bring it. Um, yeah, it's just bad. Thwacky, I want to point out, I think maybe we under tiered a little bit. It's tier 40, but the base 85 plus it gets Grassy Surge and the new
Grassy
Grassy
Glide.
Glide. Yeah, so that in and of itself, just as its own tech, I think is a little too valuable for a tier 40 point. So watch out for that. But otherwise, I have this as a great team, and I had this in the S. No, I dropped it down because of your hazards. I
Gotcha.
have this in at the top of the A tier.
Cool. Yeah, so a little bit. I think that Dragapult is the best Pokemon in the format. I think it should always go first as of right now, but I don't think it's busted. I think it is counterable. So when it came back around to me, I was just trying to find a duo that is, I don't know, like could win games on its own. So it didn't have to be Dragapult, and so it was either going to be Rillaboom Halucha or it was going to be Excadrill Tyranitar. And so I'm glad I got Excadrill at the end of round two. I do think that it's kind of like Mamoswine with how much attack it has and its speed. And our league hasn't really, I think, showed off how well Excadrill and Mamoswine and other Pokemon in that speed tier can really be. And I think that I mean, it's a sand option, but as we saw in week one, I didn't even run Sand Rush Excadrill. And I think with things like Slowbro and Mienshao as a bit of a regenerator core, then Tyranitar's Sand just acts as chip damage, almost like another entry hazard. So I like this team. I think one of the things that I like about it is Alchemy is in the middle tier. Everything above Alchemy is higher than average, and then at at the cost of getting so much top heavy shit that I have two tier 20s and a tier 40. And I think there is only like six tier 20s drafted, and I drafted two of them. So, yeah, I gave mine an A2 also for the hazards. I also don't have a grounded poison Pokemon. So Toxic Spikes, as Adam brought against me, um, could be a nuisance each week. But I gave it an A. I like my speed tiers. I like Dragapult and Mienshao is a good Scarfer. I think Rotom Mo is a good Scarfer. And Excadrill being either 88 speed or double that, I think is really fun.
Yeah, I think it's good. I definitely I do like your speed tiers also. I thought it was anyway, having them bunched just above 60, you have like 60, 61, 64.
Yeah.
I felt like there was a lot of a guessing game about are you going to run 20 speed on one of these Pokemon to outspeed Scizor or something
Yeah.
like that. So I felt like I had to throw away a couple EVs on Scizor to.
Hmm.
Anyway, that's an interesting thing that I haven't really seen before in that kind of like low tier or
Yeah.
low speed tier.
And I obviously
Like,
went for like an offensive team and a. I'm gonna actually just go back to my team real quick. Sorry, we'll be done talking about mine in a second. We're still learning how we want to address these. Yeah, I my play style with this sort of team sort of begs a offense, maybe a bulky offense, and so I think some of those low speed tiers just add to the potential for bulk. Um, I hope not with too much exchange for um, speed or offense, for that matter.
God,
Cool.
yeah. Okay. Okay. Can't keep talking about your team forever, even though
Right.
there's always more to say. Okay. Chris's team, the Galar United. Um, yeah. So just looking at like the top four or five. Oh, actually, and something I want to say about this. So as we go through, you'll see that like Kyle talked about how many Pokemon did he have above tier 100. So Kyle had, I think you had seven above tier 100,
Yeah.
and that came at the cost of two tier 20s.
Right.
So, um, one, anyway, just keep that in mind. So
Yeah.
this, you see that Chris has four Pokemon above tier 100
Yeah.
and four Pokemon at tier 100. So that does definitely lead to, so there's a maybe
There's a leveling
more,
that's happening. Whether mine's very
yes,
top heavy, this seems more like level across the tiering.
right. So, I mean, that definitely, it obviously has some benefits and some cons to it. I wonder in a in a season or in a season where there's so many busted teams or so many very top heavy, very good teams, um, in general, teams that tried to level out more, are they going to have a harder time?
Hmm.
I don't know, but just
Yeah.
something to keep in mind.
I think I
Um,
found a personal bias where the more top heavy it was, the better I liked the team. So a team like Galar United kind of went against my bias. Um, I mean, when I look at the team, I see that it's very fast, but I don't know how much it gains from being that fast. Usually, when you add speed, it's being exchanged for bulk. And looking at his defensive Pokemon, it's like what Rotom Wash, Sylveon, Delmise. I think that's. Would you call that the defensive sort of backbone of the team?
yeah, if you
If
can
you don't
include
count Mew,
Delmites in it.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's
Um,
tough. I mean, it puts a lot of weight on Rotom Wash and Sylveon, and then honestly, I think a team with Mew, when you draft something like Mew, you should draft 10 Pokemon that by themselves are a good unit so that Mew isn't freed up or isn't limited to doing a certain thing every week. It's not relegated to be the defensive wall or anything like that. So, yeah, I think that his team could be a lot bulkier and he can trade some of that speed away. Granted, he does have a lot of things that are at base 100 speed or higher. He has 100, 100, 100, 110, 112, 126. So half of his team is base 100 or higher. But I don't see a winning team being one that includes a lot of these base 100s most weeks. I think he's still having to bring Sylveon and Rotom Wash each week. And hopefully he's bringing his Lucario most weeks because it costs so much, and Mew as well.
yeah, and so looking at what can be added to those four. So I think yeah, I think Lucario has to do double work on this team. And maybe that just means Mew is offensive most weeks and then that's how it gets remedied. Um but I think something like if Talonflame had more attack, then I think that would add a lot to this
Yeah.
team. Or it, like if Lycanroc like had a little bit more attack or like one more coverage move.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which maybe it gets Fire Fang. I don't know. That could be. That's it. Probably has that coverage move, but I don't know. I guess I don't know what my actual criticism of this team is, except for I maybe agree that I think the speed is not enough is gained in exchange for the speed
Yeah.
um, compared to the level of just the overall level of team
Yeah.
that we're seeing in this draft.
Yeah. I
So,
mean, it has three hazard setters Mew, Drapion, Lycanroc, and it has a lot of removal. Like half the team has removal. I'm just more wondering how this team wins and sort of what the identity of the team is. Now, if there's a coach that's going to do something with a team that lacks a very traditional sort of identity, it would be Chris. I think he he would be someone that could pilot this team better than me. Um, but I just don't necessarily believe in the defensive core as just two Pokemon plus Mew or Delmise. And I think Mew is going to be forced into certain roles. Does Lucario have to run special and Mew have to run special to get similar damage output as Chris has on the physical attack side? I don't know. We'll have to see. I gave this team a B overall though, mainly because even with all those criticisms, he's going to be able to get up hazards. He's going to be able to hopefully keep them off of his side, and he has a lot of pivots, whether it's Rotom Wash or Sylveon or Flygon or Talonflame, that he'll be able to get into something else that either needs to set up or can hit hard.
Yeah, I agree. I think I gave this team a B plus, if I remember right. And again, yeah, there are a lot of boxes that it checks. Like you mentioned, with hazards, there's also, I believe, Drapion gets T spikes. Um, you know, there are definitely plenty of options, and especially having a team with what maybe we're having trouble discerning as a clear identity built around Mew, though, maybe that gives it an identity that we're
Yeah,
not seeing. So I gave it a B, or a B plus. I think, yeah, I think it's good. I am curious to see how it moves forward.
right. Okay, so the next team, the third pick overall, going with a tier 180 instead of a tier 200. Uh, Coach Sean drafted Volcarona, and this is his team. What do you think about it?
I so one thing when I do like a first take at teams, one thing I notice is that more colorful teams seem to draw my attention more, just in terms of the sprite, which is maybe a bad thing. So just on first look, I was like, oh, there's so much color. Look, you got red, you got green, you got blue, you got yellow. That's great. So um, that was my first take, but I think this team has a lot of great coverage. I think Ferrothorn is a really nice pairing with Volcarona, especially because since we don't have Z moves anymore, doesn't mean that Volcarona is not incredible. It obviously still is, but it means that it really wants that, second layer of spikes or that like Iron Barb Rocky helmet chip on the, somebody U turns out and you
Yeah,
switch Ferrothorn in on that. So I think that those two pair really well together, and then Crawdont cleans up so nicely, like Life Orb Aqua Jet or like SD Focus Sash Aqua Jet,
yeah,
something like that. So I just think that those top three are so threatening. And then um, Aurora Veil, I know Alola Ninetales is not the only Aurora Veil setter anymore, but I think that um,
it's the best one.
that yeah, yeah, it is. It definitely is, and I think that it adds some additional opportunities.
Yeah,
I do think that in our league, I have seen people fail because they try too hard they draft Alola Ninetales. They try too hard to make every game about Aurora Veil,
yeah,
and it makes their teams a little too predictable, a little too easy to play around.
yeah. Very
And so,
linear progression and how they try to win.
right. And so I think that um, Sean, or I could just see someone in our league getting in trouble by kind of trying to go that route every time,
Hmm.
where, just setting up right away might be better. Um, so
Yeah,
that
I
that's kind of my first take on like the top couple months.
yeah. I when I look at this team, it just looks like screens offense. It looks like Ninetales could just set up a screen and then Crawdaunt comes in, or Volcarona comes in, or even Heliolisk, maybe even Slowbro Galar, and Sigilif. Like any of these Pokemon love to sit behind Aurora Veil. So I got really excited about this team. I think this is going to be a really hard team to try to counter, like um, in team building. It seems like he has so many offensive options that if you guess the wrong Pokemon that's going to set up behind Veil, you could just lose. And with so looking at tier 100, he doesn't have any, but seven Pokemon are above tier 100. I like that top heavy aspect of the team, and I think from Slowbro up, they all can work well together. I think Volcarona being the sort of premier special threat on the team, and then Crawdont being almost the polar opposite Pokemon, where it doesn't need to set up but can, and just gets those priority moves and breaks down walls. I think that's a cool combination. And yeah, I think that these low tiers do well in certain matchups. I mean, Sigilyph with a high base speed um, and Magic Guard could be the setup sweeper at the end of a game, much like a Calm Mind Clefable. Um, so Hitmonchan, I think, also works well with this team, and Beartic to give it the Slush Rush option is cool. So I like the low tiers, and I think the top tiers are it's just like threat after threat after threat, and then Ferrothorn.
Yeah, I think if Ferrothorn were less good, then I would be nervous that this team was um too overlapping and not enough defense.
Oh, interesting.
Um, I think that there are some maybe not surprising defensive options, but just remembering like Intimidate Crocodile and Assault Vest Hitmonchan are
Hmm.
very common.
Yeah,
Thinking about those as not walls, but definitely defensive pivots to get in there's a multitude of offensive threats, and like you were saying, you maybe just have to pick one, and if you pick wrong, it could be hard. So um, it's not chancy offense. It is like a
it's
screening
kind of like
offense.
that though.
Yeah, it's reminding me of that. Um, so
So it's cool because I think in the first three drafts we've seen three different types of play styles, which is interesting. I think throughout the draft we'll find multiple different play styles. This might be one of the times in general that we have the most variety, which I think came
what did
with the universal defensive buff by having bulky Pokemon cost less.
what did you rate the Venusaurs?
Oh, sorry. I think what did I give them? I gave them an A. Yeah, one of my
Yeah,
favorite teams. One of the ones that I'd be most excited to build with.
yeah, I agree. Yeah, I also had it as an A. Yeah, I think it was, or it is, it would be very fun. I think I would have a very fun time piloting that team. So,
Cool.
uh, yeah.
All right. Next up is Baltimore Braviaries. I looking at this team. This looks like bulky offense to balance, and I think Colin is good in that sort of play style, and I'm glad we have it as a drafted style. So looking at the defensive core of Clefable, Mantine, Steelix, it looks like
Humongous.
uh, well, yeah, but those three look very familiar to the
Oh,
Columbus, or sorry, Central Ohio Libero. But one of my biggest problems with that trio was that I didn't have something like a Mungus. So my team wasn't defensive enough to take on the offense, and it wasn't offensive enough to take on, I guess, the defense of the tier of the format. So
well, this team
this
is certainly offensive enough
yeah, this
with
I think it fills out both
yeah.
things. I think it fills out both directions better. There's very few sort of middling Pokemon on this team. It's either fulfilling a role, hitting hard or being defensive. And I think that's really cool for his team. I think a Regenerator Pokemon alongside Mantine and Steelix is a really cool um, defensive core, and then add Clefable in whenever you need to. Um, but that sort of defensive backbone, I think, opens up Clefable to a lot and lets him do sort of whichever option offensively is going to be most helpful each week, whether it's Choice Band Cinderace, Choice Band Haxorus, any setup options with Poltegeist or Haxorus or Frostmoth could be really cool. I think Machamp is a good wall breaker for a team like this. Um, so overall, I thought that this I was pretty excited about this team. This feels like a better version of a team that I would have drafted last season.
Yeah, and I think you can see, we talked a little bit about how, we have more points. We added additional points. We also moved everything down a tier and added a Pokemon. So, it feels like teams are much better overall, and the average Pokemon is actually better than the average Pokemon that was drafted is better than average.
Right.
Um, so yeah, you can really see that to be able to fill out both the defensive side and the offensive side better than you were able to last season,
Yeah.
just I think shows, well, number one, like a very good quality draft, but also, um, yeah, just that we have more points and
Right.
that it's possible that we need to rethink, depending on how the season goes, we need to rethink our points and our
Yeah.
tiering.
I mean, his middle Pokemon is a tier 100, and he had an equal amount of Pokemon above and below that tier. So he has a pretty well divided team in that regard. I think he gets a lot out of his low picks. I think Steelix and Machamp, especially, even Meowstic for some variations or some weeks would be good. Um, for me, I think the biggest criticism with this team and the reason why I gave it an A minus is because the speed gear or the speed tiers have a gap between the 80s and 90s. Um, it's like you get to 65, 70, 70, and then there's not much until Haxorus. And so I think that there are a lot of teams that have like Rotom is base speed 86, Excadrill is base speed 80 or 88. Mamoswine is base speed 80. So that's like a important area. And if I had any of those Pokemon, I would feel invited to just run more offensive variations and not feel locked into running timid or jolly against this team. And because he has defensive Pokemon, um, I think it would be better to also have those speed tiers filled so that you're forcing less offensive builds from your opponent.
Yeah, I think that makes a whole lot of sense. I gave this team an A.
Cool.
I think that I'm a little concerned about the hazard removal. Is Mantine going to be running heavy duty boots? Is Frostmoth going to be running heavy duty boots every week? I mean, I know that Cinderace gets court change, so um, that makes sense. But also Cinderace, you might not, you might want to run Banded, you might want to
Sure.
run Scarf, Life Orb or something. So in general, I think it might be hard, or you might be able to put court change on Cinderace every week, but that's a sacrifice.
Yeah.
Um, so I think there's a little bit of weakness there. Um,
What did you said you gave it an A?
I gave it an A.
Yeah.
This is one of my the top half of the drafts, I think.
Awesome.
I think it's just difficult. I think there's just a lot of Pokemon that if your check to it dies, then you lose.
That's true.
Like a Moongus is a great example. Like, yeah, it's definitely able to be beaten, but if your check to it dies, you might lose.
Right.
Same with Poltegeist, same with Haxorus, same with Mantine. Same with Clefable.
Yeah,
So that to me makes team building very difficult. So I
right.
think
And I
that
think he has the wall breakers to blow holes through teams where if that thing that was supposed to be the Clefable check is gone now, well, now Clefable has a field day.
right,
So
right.
cool. Let's move on to Connor's Irish Mareeps. Um, what do you think of this team?
Wow, I love this team. I think uh, just at first glance, I think this is my favorite team in the draft. I don't know if it's not, I don't know that I necessarily think it's the best team, but it's the one that looks the most fun to me. I think Celebi has been underutilized in our draft league, so I'm excited to see that used. I think double water is great, especially with Milotic getting flip turn.
Hmm.
I think Magnezone losing HP Fire is less bad than it seems because I think that Analytic was um, is very good, and I think that it will actually benefit a lot from not, because it doesn't have HP Fire. Magnet Pull is less valuable because it doesn't have this like
Steel
great way to take
Strike,
out Paragon.
anti. Yeah,
Exactly. So it's free to run analytic. So because of that, I think actually Connor's going to see that in just in calking, and people are going to see like those slow volt switches are going to be really brutal.
yeah.
Um, and
And
I
he
like the
doesn't,
low tiers
yeah,
on
he
his team a lot
doesn't
too.
have much ground weakness. He has Magnezone and Salazzle, which both hate taking earthquakes, but everything after that is just like his team is not very ground weak, which I think is going to help both of those two Pokemon. And I do agree with
Yeah,
you that his low tiers all do something cool for him. Orbeetle, where it has a lot of overlap with Celebi, also gives some more defensive options. It also gives it webs. Um, Rhydon's a good low tier, high value pick. Rotom Frost. I mean, any Rotom I think is good at for its cost. And then Dusknoir with the attack stat of 100 and getting access to Poltergeist makes Dusknoir actually a bit of an offensive Pokemon in a way that it might not have been in previous formats.
yeah, yeah. So I think just each Pokemon is very solid, and there's a lot of good synergy there. We haven't been talking about cores so much this analysis, but I think the cores are here too with
Right.
like Dragon Fairy Steel, Fire Water Grass. I think they're there.
Yeah, and even like a defensive core of Como-O, Celebi, Milotic is really cool, but I think also an offensive core of Azu, Como-O, Celebi, um, like those can all break for each other. So I think it's cool.
Right.
I think that so when I looked at this team, this was initially one of my favorite Pokemon drafts, and then kind of maybe found some criticisms that I didn't originally see, and those are sort of taking precedent for me. So it's like I think that the defogger on the team is Rotom Frost, which shares a fire weakness with two of the hazard setters in Celebi and Orbeetle, and another really good Pokemon, high value Pokemon, Magnezone. So there's that. Rotom Frost also shares fire. Sorry, fighting weakness with Magnezone. So Rotom Frost being the only defog could be a hindrance for the team, and I think Rhydon, um, he might be needing Rhydon to do a lot defensively because of the fire weaknesses and the electric um, weaknesses with the double water. Um, but I think overall, I gave it a B plus. Ultimately, I think that Azu. This is a good team to build around Azu with. I think that Azu is checked mainly by bulky waters, and Connor has Celebi and Magnezone to deal with those bulky waters, along with offensive versions of Rotom Frost. Um, I think if this team maybe had one more defogger or wish support, I would like it a lot more, because I think hazards over time start to really hinder this team. Because, um, yeah, I think that Connor will be forced to build a lot of positive pressure and positive momentum into his teams in order to win. Because if those hazards get up and Roden Frost goes down, then it's going to be um, whichever team can last the longest.
Yeah, I definitely agree about the defog, and I'll just say that, or the only thing I'll add is that in this season with a lot of really high caliber drafts, I think um, we're going to start to see, well, hazards are always big, but I think hazards will be very big in this season, and I think that that is something that was a little bit, you know, is consistent in some of the weaker drafts is that their flaw, or not the weaker drafts, just the some a common flaw is to not have enough defoggers.
Yeah,
So I think that that is gonna have make some teams have their work cut out for them, including this one.
cool. What'd you rate this team?
I gave it an A minus.
And I gave it a B plus.
Yep.
Okay, what's
Yeah,
next?
I called this like right above the bottom of my top cut.
Nice. Yeah, honestly, it's weird how there are some teams that I look at and I'm like, this is awesome, and then you kind of spoil that by trying to find weaknesses um,
Mhm.
in the team, and I think I did it with that one because just intuitively that's one of my favorite ones.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Houston Haxorus, um, I learned today that Ian's first two picks got sniped before it got to him.
Yeah,
Both of the first two picks.
yeah,
So that sucks. And I think there's a really solid team here that is especially impressive in light of that fact.
yeah.
Um,
So Corviknight first round, and then oh wait, was it? Yeah, it was Zero Aura first round. Um, but Ian has two tier 200 Pokemon. But Zero Aura first round, I think, is a good pick. I think that Zero Aura is still really, really good in Draft League, especially without other amazing electric types like Coco or any of the Thunderous Pokemon possibly having some overlap with Zera Aura. I think that its coverage is good. It can go physical or special. And the question is, how do you build a good team around Zera Aura? And I think Houston Haxorus answered that question. I mean, Zera Aura doesn't like ground types. It doesn't really like grass types, bulky grass types. And um, immediately after Zera Aura, Ian drafted Weavile, which is going to be able to break for those break against those ground types and those grass types that Zera Aura doesn't like, and also is in a good speed tier so that Zera Aura can run more offensive variants and doesn't have to be the fastest Pokemon on Ian's team every week. Um, Ian has a few okay hazard options. There's Slurpuff and Dragalge, Miltank, and Colossal, but none of the top tier threats on Ian's team are hazard setters. Um, on the defensive
yeah,
side, we have Corviknight, we have Gastrodon, which have good type synergy. I think Slurpuff, and then I think a lot of his bottom picks help sort of fill out a defensive core um, where Corviknight, Gastrodon might have some checks.
yeah. I think so. You talked about there was a team before that was similar to yours. So this, I also last season had Corviknight, Gastrodon, Colossal, and some. Well, I guess I had two problems on that team. One was that I didn't have anything that was fast,
Hmm.
and that in some ways negated like my defensive options. And so having Zero Aura and Weavile, I think, does a really great job of taking advantage of that, the defense. The other thing that I noticed is that Corviknight doesn't have hazards, Gastrodon doesn't have hazards, Colossal has hazards. Um, it's hard to justify running all three of those in a week.
Hmm.
And it's hard to justify sitting Gastrodon or Corviknight at home in place of Colossal. And so I think Ian is going to have a difficult time. He'll the rocker will be the seventh Pokemon every week, I think. And so, which is a little bit of a shame because I think that some of these offensive threats, like Zero Aura in particular, I think nets a lot of extra KOs with like with rocks up or
That's a
something.
good point.
So that's maybe a just something to watch out for Ian, and anyway, it would just suck to swap Miltank out for
Right.
Weavile one week. You'd hate to do that.
Right.
So that's something that be on the lookout for. But obviously, the type synergy is great. Especially Corviknight. Actually, Ian has three switch-ins: Steam Engine Colossal, or Gastrodon, or Flashfire Chandelure.
Right.
It's like those are all really great
And
switch-ins.
even Dragalge is a decent resist. And then on the electric side, you have Zera Aura and Gastrodon and Virizion. So there are a lot of good resists to fit with Corviknight. Um, it's hard to see on this screen. I wish you could sort by speed up here. But Ian has some good speed tiers. I think Zera Aura, Weavile, and Virizion are great. Just three fast Pokemon. And then I think that there's enough going on in the middle and the bottom part of this draft that I like his speed tiers quite a bit, actually.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting is that we haven't seen for a while is that Ian has one, two, three, four, five, six Pokemon below the tier 100, and then four Pokemon above. So that's not the same as Chris, because Chris had a bunch that were at tier 100. So
Right,
I think this is the first draft we've seen that has more than half of the draft below tier
right.
100.
And
But it
it's weird
doesn't.
because it's like technically you would still call it top heavy because like all those low picks are because Ian drafted Corviknight and Zera Aura and Weavile, which are three tier one Pokemon in our traditional format. But also, Ian didn't draft anything that's 40 or 20 points.
Right, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And because he was able to avoid those 40 and 20 point Pokemon, it doesn't, the low tiers look very useful on this team. I think Unfezant has, um, it seems like it patches up a speed tier, but actually I don't think it's threatening enough to really patch it up very
Hmm.
well. So maybe you can run a super luck set one week or something. But in general, I think that the top 10 Pokemon, I think, are very
Yeah.
good,
I think
have a lot of
that
synergy.
I think that if one of the low tiers was actually just dumped to get even lower, if he traded like let's say Unpresent um to a tier 20 Pokemon and then had those 40 extra points to grab another good tier 80 or even switching a tier 80 up to a tier 120 um could do really well for like just bringing like having six Pokemon that by themselves um stand on their own. Um because this is guaranteed that every week at least one tier 80 or lower is going to come. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. There are good Pokemon that are tiered lower than 100. I think Virizion and Gastrodon are good examples, or like Steelix. But in general, I I think this is my bias for um, top heavy drafts that I'm curious and I would kind of prefer if this team had um, one more tier 100 or above.
Yeah. One other thing I just want to point out, or just pose this question, see if Haxorus can answer it for us this season. But I wonder how valuable Sticky Webs actually is on this team because Zeraora and Weavile don't necessarily need webs up to be faster than everything. And a lot of things that are lower speed, like Dragalge is almost too slow. Maybe it lets you run no speed, and then Webs lets you outspeed some base 60s or something like that.
Hmm.
But I guess I'm not. And, Slurpuff obviously has the belly drum set too, and some other interesting tech. But in terms of Webs, I'm not sure I see that this team benefits a whole lot from that.
Yeah, I think that Adam and I, well, when we talked beforehand, we talked about our disagreement here because I think Slurpuff having the option for webs forces in defoggers, which Weavile and Zero Aura eat up. And I think that Slurpuff, with those options to potentially sweep or be a wish passer or set hazards, um, really helps out. Make helps make this team a little bit more flexible, either on the defensive side or the offensive side, depending on the week. Um, I gave this team an A minus.
I need to change my screen before I can check. I gave this team.
B plus.
I gave this team a B plus.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's very good.
yeah. All right. Next up, Punxsutawny,
Oh,
Pachirisu.
we.
So
What do you think about my team?
let me talk about your team.
Yeah.
I think that it is well balanced. It looks like a UU, like a viability chart. It's just like a lot of good Pokemon. Your highest tier Pokemon being Hydreigon as your first round pick, I think was a good one. I think that out of the 180s, it's one of my favorites there. I think it gets really good options with Nasty Plot and yeah, primarily Nasty Plot this generation. Um, it also gets Gale Shot, which I don't know if you knew, but would be cool to maybe run once or twice. Um, but
Hmm.
on the offensive side, you have Hydreigon, Scizor, Alakazam, which is like a good place, a really good place to start. I think that it's like a Psychic Dark Steel or Psychic Dark Bug core, which could be really fun. It's also pretty balanced on the physical and special side. And then on the defensive side, you have Seismitoad, Wheezing, Piloswine, and then other options, whether it's Comfy, whether it's Scizor, just depending on the week, which is really cool. Pigcurchin. Um, you have one, two, three, four, five Pokemon above tier 100, and then you have Wheezing at tier 100. I think your low tiers all are could find just as much utility on your team as your tier 100. Uh, Cinchino adds a good speed tier. I don't think it's bad for having base 95 attack, having skill link to like stab normal moves. Also, can be a decent scarfer with U turn. Cinchino's good. Comfrey's good. It can run defensive utility or it can run like Life Orb, Calm Mind offense. Um, Piloswine is a good low tier rocker. And then I really like the Pigcurchin grab. I hope it's good. I think that Pigcurchin has the chance of being a really fun draft league option, especially with its like weird middle stats. It could be maybe physical. It could be maybe like a life orb special attack with electric surge and that new electric move. Could be actually incredibly powerful with base special attack 91. Um, and then with that, you have Kling Klang, decent steel type to add alongside Scizor. Also, probably one of the better tier 60s. And I think it might actually do some good on your team. At first, I was like, why would you ever choose Kling Klang over Scizor? But I could see some options given its defensive distribution, and options for setup and different uses it might have alongside electric terrain. You also have an unburdened Pokemon with Hitmonlee. Um, and Hitmonlee showed its worth with Anchorage Ninetales last season. I think it was the best performer overall on Ninetales roster. And I think it works really well on your team. Um, Now, it doesn't look as top heavy or as overbearing as some of these other teams we've seen. You don't have two tier hundreds. In fact, you don't have any tier hundreds. Um, so I would say I'm hesitant to call it one of the best teams because it doesn't have that sort of threat factor that I think a lot of team has. But I'm optimistic about just how balanced the team was. If there was an argument for the best drafting style, not just being going top heavy, it would be I think it would be this team.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I am pleased with this draft. Um, I think it's good. I think it's fun. I think one thing that I like about this draft is that there are a lot of different options. So I think Hydreigon and Scizor um, never have to get shoehorned into anything really. They
Right.
can both run Defog, they can both run Roost. Um, they could both run like sub. So Scizor could run like sub bulk up or sub SD, and Hydreigon can run like sub nasty plot. They both get U-turn. So I think that they, but they don't. I don't. They don't share any weaknesses. Um, they kind of switch in for each other. Um, so I think that uh, those as my offensive threats I'm excited about, and part of the utility. Well, while they maybe don't have the same like wow stats. Maybe base 98 speed is a good speed tier, but it's not Dragapult.
Yeah.
I think that like the move pools and the versatility is where we're gonna um, see these Pokemon break out. That's
Yeah.
my hope at least.
Um,
I am a
fine.
little worried.
Oh, go on.
Oh, go ahead. I'm a little worried about my defense. I think that Seismitoad is like Clefable, and that it's amazing, but it's amazing defensively with stats that don't quite look like it should be amazing
Hmm.
defensively. Um, but you only if you can back it up with other Pokemon. Like it
Right.
can't just stand by itself. And so I think that
And it
I could
looks
get
like it's
shoehorned.
going to be, in my view, shoehorned more into the specially defensive side, um, because you have Wheezing on the physically defensive side, Kling Klang or Piloswine on the physically defensive side, and you wouldn't want Comfy to just be your special switch in.
Right, absolutely. So that's um some level of concerning for me.
Adam,
I think
I'm happy you drafted Hazards.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, hazards are they're so good. Yeah, Seismitoad, I think yeah, last season especially with Gastrodon, Corviknight, um, and Colossal, I felt like I had to bring Colossal every week and it was such a huge um it just made games a lot harder than they needed to be. So I'm excited about Seismitoad for that. T-Spike is always great, and I think Pincurchin and Piloswine are uh, good low tiers that can
Yeah,
bring hazard options.
yeah, I agree. I gave your team an A minus before I prepped against it. And I think it might be an A team, but I kept it at A minus because that's what I wanted to keep the grade when I graded all of them.
Thanks. Yeah, I hope that it's hard to prep for. That's part of the plan. One thing I think I feel bad about this, so I'm gonna call it out. I actually meant to propose that Cinchino go up a tier, and I forgot. Um, and then I didn't say anything, and then I drafted it. Um, I think it's good, and it also gets triple axle, which gives it some extra coverage, which maybe overlaps with Rock Blast a little bit. But I think the fact that Cinchino has both Technician and Skill Link gives triple axle a little bit of additional utility
Yeah.
in that. So Skill Link means that they'll always hit, but Technician makes it much more powerful.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, I just wanted to call that out in particular. So I would feel bad if someone got surprised by that. Um, so
Yeah.
yep.
I mean, you drafted it round 7. I don't think you like. I don't think you should worry too much. Cinchino is
That's
good
true.
though, and people are going to get surprised by its damage output. And that new ice move helps Cinchino against bulky grass types, which scares Seismitoad a lot. So I think it definitely has some good value on your team. Maybe it could go up a tier. I think it still might be just a good tier 80. Um, would you rate your team?
I give it an A minus.
Me too.
I think it's good. I think it has some problems, namely that which didn't look like problems until after the draft. Um, After seeing everybody else's like really powerhouse teams, it makes me wonder, like, do I really have an answer for like Choice Band Rillaboom? And as I
Hmm.
was prepping against your team, I was like, oh, like Excadrill 2-hit KOs every single Pokemon on my team. It's like, well, okay, that's Wheezing was supposed to be the answer, but okay, well, when you get Molt Breaker, it's like
Right.
that's okay. So anyway, I'm worried that that's going to happen every single week. Where I'll be like, well, okay, just got to win in 15 turns then, I guess.
Sure. Okay. Next up, Orlando Magikarp.
Oh my gosh, I love this team. I think it is so fun. I we'll get to how good I think it is, but separate from that, I just think it's such a fun team. I think Chansey and Reuniclus are just so defensively nasty together, and Galarian Weezing. Um, so thinking about like setting up T Spike, then going to Reuniclus and Calm Minding, like Calm Mind Sword Power.
Mm.
Um, I think anyway, I think just the defensive options are so fun, and it's not really stall, but it's
It's
um,
pretty. I mean, how else is it going to win? It's kind of like a balanced stall team.
that's true. Yeah, is it just going to be set up Gyarados every week?
I
Is it
hope
going to
not.
be set up Rabombi?
Yeah.
Set up Scolipede?
Yeah.
Set up Charizard? I mean, there are definitely setup options, but like Charizard, Scolipede, Rabombi, and Gyarados all share a rock weakness.
Right.
So, okay, Scarf your Terrakion, call it good. Um, so that's maybe a concern.
Yeah, I think that the big question I had was how does it win? Um, but I mean, Ben only has 4 Pokemon that are below tier 120, and so the bulk is just there. I think that like Spadef Gyarados sets like behind Intimidate could get really annoying with like it gets that grass move now and it gets Earthquake, and so I think defensive Gyarados on a team like this could be really fun. Um, yeah, there's just hazards in Chansey, Weezing, Palisand, Rabombi, Duraludon, and Scolipede. And then it has its own defog options with Weezing and Rabombi and Charizard. Um, I think the big weak link on this team is that Charizard. Um, I think he could maybe even forego a fire type and just get something that hits incredibly hard for that tier. Maybe like uh, I want to say Xploud, but he has the Chansey. But yeah,
What I
something.
really think,
What?
I personally, this is just a personal preference. I think Duraludon is not very good.
Yeah.
I've just had very little success when I've tried to use it, and so one option could be to take one of your lower tiers, trade it down to get some extra points, and then see if you can't get a tier 140 like an Obstagoon or
Yeah, just some
something.
sort of heavy breaker.
Yeah, I think yeah, just re-looking at this team and
Right.
imagining Obstagoon instead of
Yeah.
Raichu or something like that.
Obstagoon, Haxorus, Hatterene, Indeedee, like anything that just hits freaking hard.
Yeah, I think that that makes this team a lot scarier. Yeah, because a lot of the offense really needs to set up. And I guess Duraludon, the stats make it look like it has offense, but I don't know. I'm not convinced. I don't know. Run some calcs. Play with it on the ladder. Tell me what you think.
I'm a
Um,
Duraludon believer, but we disagree. We disagree with that. I think
that's
Duraludon could
fine.
be cool with Gyarados um, as some
Yeah,
weird options.
I like that Palossand gets Scorching Sands, the new ground type move.
Yeah, I think it's the best
That's
special attacking ground type Pokemon with that move now.
wow. And I like the Trick Room option with Reuniclus and Alolan Executor.
Yeah,
I think that's fun. So I don't know. Yeah, that's maybe the one criticism of this team is yeah, like where's the breaker and slash how to actually win, like
yeah.
convert a good match into a win.
If that
Um,
if that's always the in defense of this team, if that's always the question, then stall teams inevitably look worse than they are. Like if you just
but
saw a pink team on OU, it's just Chansey,
mhm.
Blissey, whatever, you would go, how does this win? So challenges to Ben to win with stall, which I don't know if we've seen do well in recent Porch League metas.
Yeah, I the last one that I really remember was Colin had a stall team in like season 9-1 or something. Is that right?
Yeah, he went
Um,
from winning the league to like struggling to get a win. Is that true?
yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Um, so I I don't know. Have we seen maybe there's another stall team that I'm forgetting about?
There have
Or
been
like some good.
variations of stall, but I don't think it's been like, oh, this is stall.
I
Maybe
think
Brian. I
Brian
think
Kim has
Brian
had
and
some
Chris have
good.
had stall
Yeah,
options. Maybe halfway through
yeah.
the season.
Oh, yeah. I think there's one season where Chris traded for Skarmory and it like really crushed the back half of the season. Is
Right.
that right?
I don't. It's
I
been.
can't remember.
I swear it's probably been a year and a half. Like, so I think Ben has done well with fat teams before, and this is the fattest that he's drafted. I would like something that hits harder off the bat, and this team would have would be better for me. It doesn't have great speed tiers, but that's not what this type of team is. So overall, I gave it a B plus.
Yeah, I also gave this team a B plus.
It might be my favorite B plus, but just given the weaknesses that it could have, I couldn't rank it higher than that.
Hmm. Yeah.
Who's next? Hippowdon or Hippopotas?
Yeah.
Yes. Cool.
Okay.
Go for it.
So, Hippopotas, I think, I mean, this is one of those teams that on first look just looks like every single mon is such a threat. And I know it was ranked at the top of a couple of the ones that draft whatever the tier lists that were posted before. So, I mean, Jirachi has, Wish, Rocks, Set, Healing Wish, or yeah, Scarf, Ironhead, Healing Wish, U-Turn, it has a lot of different things. Cosmic Power, right?
Yeah.
Kirim, we've obviously seen like Specs wins games. Terrakion we saw do really well last season with Band. Primarina. Anyway, just everything is very threatening, top to bottom, except for maybe I don't know enough about Sandaconda to be afraid of it yet. Um, maybe Lickitung. Um, maybe the Cloud9 has some good utility. Um, Thievul, I'm not convinced on. Um, but aside from that, every mod on this team looks very threatening, which I think is a key point. Um, the one thing, or one of the things that I will say about this team that kind of after my first take, and I looked through every single team and I was trying to dig through, I think that this team, so something that's helpful when you're trying to decide whether to draft a low tier or not is to think, will I ever bring this instead of one of my better Pokemon? So I'm looking at Thievul, for example. So it's a tier 20, right? It's a ghost resist. It's Brian's only ghost resist on the team, so I don't think he has a normal type. Oh, he has Lickitung. Okay, so two tier 20s are the ghost resists. Um, so, but just like, what's the utility that Thievul has on this team? Just as an example. So, I don't think Brian will ever bring Thievul as a special attacker because Kyurem and Primarina and Rotom Heat and Roserade are all better special attackers. Um, he doesn't really have. I mean, I guess there's always creative ways to get your unburden boost, but there's not necessarily like terrain to really take advantage of, which I think is very good for Thievul. And compared to the other Pokemon on his team, so Thievul's ability Stakeout is best when you're switching out. Um, but Thievul's actually the if Brian or when Brian brings it, it'll be the easiest Pokemon to handle on this team. So probably it won't force very many switches on a team like this. And so I just can't. So I'm just looking at this team overall, and I'm seeing Thievul's not the only Pokemon that it would be hard to justify bringing. Like Scyther, I think, is another example. Maybe it'll have some utility. Like a dual wing beats set we're seeing on the ladder is really good. But that's kind of my question. Is there too much overlap in the threats, even though there's obviously very, very many threats?
Yeah.
Um, that's just a question that I have about this team.
Yeah. I think that so my take is especially more first impression when I rated the teams is that this has the best top six Pokemon um, out of all the teams. From Roserade up, I think that it's just hands down. You could just bring that most weeks and do great. Um, and then the question is, how much is that worth? I think that's worth a lot on this team. Honestly, there's some maybe weakness overlap. Kyurem and Terrakions share a fighting weakness. Terrakion and Rotom share a water weakness. Um, Jirachi Roserade fire weakness. So there's some overlap. And then looking at those and going, okay, so what is the fire switch in? Well, it's not as much there. What's the fighting switch in? Is it going to be Roserade? What's the so there might be some lack of synergy in how these defensive lower tiers um, help out patching up these top six. But honestly, I think that this top six is um, my favorite. Um, I think that it's all bulky and it's all offensive. They all can live one hit from nearly everything and probably kill that thing in return. I think Hitmontop having Intimidate is helpful for the team. I also don't know anything about Sandaconda. I think Scyther is a good low tier, even if it does overlap with some of these, especially like the rock weaknesses with Rotom and Kyurem. Um, I think that there's going to be multiple weeks though where it's like having something of this speed tier that hits hards immediately is going to be really good. Um, so I really like this team. Like you said, ghost resists are lacking, and maybe some of the defensive options don't necessarily fit perfectly on top of um, on Brian's top six, but those top six are enough for me to plus him on top in Sandaconda. are enough for me to give this an A rating.
Yeah, um I gave this a B plus rating. This was the top of my B pluses. I think that I'm unconvinced right now, and I think that I haven't mentioned it yet, but the speed tiers I have a question about. Just because the fastest Pokemon is the base 108 Terrakion, which is fast,
Yeah,
but it's not, so it's a very offensive team. Um, but like you said, it's very bulky offense, so most things can live at least one hit. But almost every team, actually maybe every single team has Pokemon faster than base 108. I'd have to double check.
hmm.
Um,
That's a good
and
point.
so it's just interesting to think about. Okay, Kyurem and Rotom Heat are
Yeah.
taking rocks damage, and so does does that mean that the Hippopotas should just preemptively scarf one of these top six every week? I mean, they're all great scarfers.
Yeah, especially Rotom,
Every
Heat,
single
and
one of them.
Jirachi are just really good scarfers in general.
Yeah, Roserade, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So they're all great. Are you gonna have to preemptively scarf one? And is that, I don't know, maybe not, but it's just a question.
Yeah.
Um, so something like Zero Aura could be a real problem for this team. And I have a feeling that a lot of teams have one thing that will be a big problem.
Cool. All right. Next is the Cville Weaviles. The new branding for Coach Andy. Oh man, this is a good team. I'll just go ahead and say that I gave it the S tier. It's the only one that I gave an S rank. I called an S rank a something that was strong, um, all high value picks with multiple win cons and no clear criticisms. So this team is built around the core Rillaboom Lucha. And then much like how I consider my team, where I have like an offensive core and then that other wild card, just good offensive Pokemon by itself. Andy has Necrozma. So I think most teams are going to have a hard time dealing with all three of these Pokemon. And he didn't even have to spend 200 points on any of them. Necrozma was one of the hardest hitting Pokemon, great for its value. It might be a tier 200 Pokemon, especially with what it could potentially do with the new moves. Um, and then Halucha is a good 160, a great 160 with terrain. And Rillaboom is definitely under tiered at 160, probably a 180 Pokemon. Um, so these three already make it so tough for um, teams to have to deal with. Andy has good hazard options in Necrozma, Cobalion, Mudsdale, Whirlipede, Tentacruel, decent removal with Tentacruel and Rotom, and then Halucha. Um, and um, and yeah, his team really isn't that weak to rocks, especially these like top Pokemon. I mean, Incineroar you can just run boots on. And then other than that, with the grassy terrain recovery, um, hazards aren't going to be the worst problem for his team to deal with. Maybe spikes starts hurting after a while, because the Pokemon that's immune to spikes is probably going to be in the back, Halucha. Um, but I was having a difficult time criticizing this draft. Everything from tier 100 and up has a place on the team. And then if your low tiers are Aromateas, and then regular Rotom, and then Clawitzer, which I think is a good tier 40 Pokemon with Mega Launcher. It basically gets stabbed like four different types. And it also gets that new normal move, which is it called Terrain Pulse? I think it's
Right.
Terrain Pulse,
Yeah, yeah.
which gives it stab of it gives it a stab grass move with Rillaboom's grassy terrain. So
Right. Yeah, which synergizes with Mega Launcher too.
yeah,
Yeah, just nuts. Um, one, sorry, I'm not sure if you were done yet, but
I'm done.
one secret, or not secret thing, but one thing that flies under the radar about this team that's really brilliant, I think, is how well Tentacruel fits on it. I think Tentacruel is a really amazing Pokemon. I mean, the Spadef 120 Spadef is really really good.
Right.
And part of the reason why it doesn't get the poison typing is actually helpful in a lot of situations. Like it lets you switch in on fighting moves, on fairy moves.
Right.
Um, but it doesn't get drafted very often because a lot of times bulky water people want a bulky water type to switch into a ground type Pokemon,
Right.
ground type moves. And so I think, and the other thing is that people want their bulky waters to have recovery.
Hmm.
And so Tentacruel doesn't have those two things. So in Gen 7, for example, it would run Z Haze a lot to get the full recovery. Um, and this, uh, and part of the other reason why it's such a good water type is that it has rapid spin and it has T spikes.
Yeah.
Um, so those are incredible. We talked, last gen about how amazing Tapu Fini was for having defog. So
Yeah.
Tentacruel has rapid spin, so usually better than defog, and also can set hazards. So having a Pokemon like Tentacruel with a Pokemon like Rillaboom, so getting the Grassy Surge, so you're getting the extra recovery which Tentacruel really wants, and you're also nerfing ground type moves, which is something Tentacruel really wants. And so I think those two things are synergized very well. I think also Incineroar can pivot in on psychic moves, so you're not necessarily afraid of those.
Right.
Um, and Necrozma can totally pivot in on a psychic move, which is also nice for Cobalion and Halucha. So, um, anyway, I think that people are going to forget about Tentacruel and their team building, and I think that actually people will lose to Tentacruel a lot of weeks.
Hmm.
That's my
Whether it's
guess.
through toxic spikes or just not
Right,
having the best way to deal with it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure. So I also gave this team an S rank. I thought this was my favorite team, or this was the best team overall. I
Yeah.
thought. Um,
I'm a little
yeah,
bit bummed
again,
because I feel like the team is incredibly versatile, even if Rillaboom didn't get grassy glide. And I feel like we're gonna see less Rotoms and Tentacruels because Rillaboom's just gonna grassy glide its way to victory most weeks.
yeah, that's yep. You're right.
Cool. Um,
Okay,
two left. We
two
have
more.
Columbus Cobalions. You want to talk about them?
Yeah, sure. This team, I think, is the other team. This has the best top five. So maybe Brian Tim has the best top six. I think this has the best top five. Um, I don't know if there's a sixth Pokemon to really go with that so well, but Aegislash, Dracovish, Keldeo, Tangrowth, Togekiss is absolutely bonkers. Especially Keldeo and Dracovish. Kyle and I were talking before this about how cool having double water types is. So, maybe like what's your water type switching? For me, like maybe Seismitoad or something. Okay, well, you know, now it's working double time. And it's working on the physical and on the special side. And Keldeo can just flip turn. Um, so I think that those are great. And Tangrowth I think is a really good value for its tier. Togekiss is a good value for its tier. Um, Aegislash is a great Pokemon. So I don't know. The low tiers I have some questions about. Um, like maybe Claydol is better than I think it is, but I don't think it's very good. Um, I always the stats make it look better than it is. From whenever I've done calcs in the past. So maybe it's amazing this gen somehow, but So I have some questions about that. It's slow enough that it makes it hard to rapid spin sometimes. I do think Kangaskhan and Haunter are at least have some appropriate utility. Um, Kangaskhan is nice in that it gets scrappy, but is also immune to ghost moves. So it's a switch in, and it can, fire back with stab,
Yeah.
whatever. And Haunter is similar to Kadabra, which we were debating in the preseason tier change, talking about, oh, it's easy to scarf and or put specs on it, call it good.
Yeah.
So there are definitely some utility options in the low tiers. Like Volt have sticky webs, which will maybe be good for something like Flinchlock Togekiss or Banded Dracovish or SD or Specs Aegislash.
Hmm.
So I don't know, we'll see. But I think that this team could become a bit predictable if even though that doesn't necessarily help you win.
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that this team goes against sort of the check all the boxes um, mantra that you and I have had, and it made it really difficult for me to rate. Um, I mean, its hazards are Claydol and Vikavolt, and its removal are Claydol and Togekiss. So not the best. And then, uh, but then it just hits incredibly hard. Having Aegislash, Dracovish, and Keldeo come every week, it's like it doesn't even matter if there's no like fire, water, grass, dragon, fairy, steel. Check all the speed tiers sort of inclinations. If you can just win because you just overpower your opponent. Um, so I ended up giving this team a B plus for kind of two reasons. I am not convinced that the hazards will help with the chip damage that things like Keldeo, Dracovish, and Aegislash like. Um, and then also a lot of the attackers would also benefit from a turn to setup, like maybe Aegislash um, or Keldeo, and I think maybe even like a low tier screens option, even Vanillix. What's that, tier 80? I think. Yeah, in place of Rapidash. I don't think you need Rapidash on this team. I don't think you need a fire type, especially a bad fire type. Um, get Vanillix, get up Veil, and go to town. One other thing as well is I think that um, a move like what's the ice move that is super effective against water types?
Freeze
Freeze dry.
dry.
Yeah, freeze dry is a threat for Dracovish, Keldeo, Tangrowth, Togekiss, and Claydol. Um, it's not a very popular move, but uh, that's an option. I think, yeah, honestly, wow, I probably shouldn't have said that Vanillix would be a good switch with Rapidash, but I think I think it'd be a great switch.
Nice. One thing I have the same question about this team that I have about the Hippopotas team with the top speed being 108 Keldeo. Um, so there's lots of threats. I know this one does have a webs option in Vikavolt, but um, I'm just a little curious if maybe it looks good on paper, but every week, oh, this week I have to deal with Weavile. Okay, well, how am I going to do that? This week I have to deal with, um, Dragapult. So I'm curious about that. That it'll just seem like every week it's like, oh, if just one thing were different, then I could totally steamroll them.
Yeah,
But
I can see that.
yeah.
What grade did you give it?
I think I gave this an A.
Okay.
This was yeah, yep.
This, yeah, I gave it a B plus. I think it's one of those ones where it's like I like it more than I rated it. But I think B plus points to the possible holes or criticisms that I have.
Hmm.
We are on to the last one. Anchorage
Birdi.
Ninetales.
Um, I like this team. I think that um it yeah, there's some low some low tiers that I'm not sure about, like Galar and Rapidash. I'm not sure what it does or what kind of value it adds. Carkol, I think, is um probably fine, but Colossal was a hard bring for me most times I brought it, so imagine Carkol being similarly difficult.
Yeah,
The Steam Engine is obviously nice with Skarmory as a switch in. I think that the top tiers are fun.
yeah,
Lots of hazard options with Webs, Galvantula, Skarmory is obviously great. But I kind of see this team the way I'm imagining this team going is it kind of bypasses Vaporeon and Eldegoss as regenerator mons. Or maybe,
yeah.
so imagine this Skarmory, Gengar, Darmanitan, Galvantula, Eldegoss, Vaporeon. Imagine you bring those. So sure, you can switch around with Eldegoss and Vaporeon, throw off Toxics or whatever, click Heal Bell, but maybe not accomplish very much.
You said
Um,
offensively, not accomplish
yeah,
much.
yeah. The option, it seems like the win con is set up webs, set up rocks, go to Darmanitan, click Banded Flare Blitz,
Hmm.
go to Gengar, click Spec Shadow Ball. It seems go to Indeedee, click Specs Expanding Force. It
Hmm.
seems like those are the options, which are not bad options. I'm just curious about the versatility
Yeah,
on this team. It seems like it could get locked into one very particular style every week.
yeah. I I don't know if my criticism is that deep. My big criticism is that there's no ground type, which with Skarmory you want something good that can be that electric switching. I also am not a fan of Eldegoss that much. It might be worth 80 points instead of 100 points. Um, so even something like switching Eldegoss to get a ground type, I don't know, Rhyperior, I think could be cool. There's also no fairy type besides Rapidash. So it's not really a good switch in defensively, which you want in a fairy type, especially when your dragon type and your steel type are both defensive Pokemon. You want a good defensive fairy. I don't know if it could be afforded by things getting moved around, but I think maybe like Grimmsnarl or Gardevoir could be really cool that way. Um, I really like Indeedee with Gengar, especially because the psychic terrain makes it so that Sucker Punch or Bullet Punch or any of these priority moves aren't going to go off onto Gengar. And so I think for me, it would be like Skarmory, Gengar, Darmanitan, Galvantula, Indeedee, Vaporeon. I think is a tough team. And I think there are good reasons to bring Druddigon some weeks. Um, I mean, you can just set up rocks easily. You could glare things. I think Beware this generation, I think normal types are pretty good. Still, maybe less still. I don't know. I've been liking stab normal moves a lot more recently, and so I think Beware could have a cool impact on the team. So for me, it's just Rapidash, Carkol, and Eldegoss that aren't my favorites, and then trying to fill in that electric type move switch in and getting a better fairy would be helpful for this team. I mean, there's a lot of hazards with Skarmory and Galvantula, Carkol, Druddigon. Even the defog or the removal options are pretty okay, I think, with Skarmory and Eldegoss mainly, and then also Carkol. Um, I guess another big criticism that I have is that there's a speed gap between base. What is it? I don't think. I think no, that's wrong. Um, yeah, I think that this team has a lot of potential, a lot more. I think this is the best Anchorage Ninetales team that we've seen. I think that the synergy is there for the most of the picks, and I think the ones that where I don't necessarily see the synergy to, um, those can be replaced, and this team would be really scary. Honestly, I think that psychic terrain um, is going to be tough. I think a lot of people drafted priority in order to fill in um, maybe a lack of speed that their team has. Um, and so just denying that priority on team preview um, will be really, really fun and difficult to build around.
Yeah, I think yeah, I'm very interested to see how Brian uses this team. I think it should be fun.
Cool. Real quick, we will debut our two. I'll just in post put up the two uh, tiers list that we have. But why don't you go ahead and talk about yours a little bit?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So again, I think I mentioned this at the beginning, but I ranked all the teams in the order that I thought they belonged in. And I saw kind of like a clear what I thought were five teams that were better than the rest of the teams.
Yeah.
Um, and so in those I have the Weaviles and then the Central Ohio Libero, Venusaurs, Braviaries, and Cobalions. So those were the teams that stuck out to me um, after kind of repeated reviewing as teams that would be very difficult to build against, teams that I think have um, just a lot of options, and they maybe. I think there are some criticisms of yours and the Venusaurs and Braviaries and Cobalions, which we talked about. And so I have those in the A tier, and then I have the Weaviles in the S tier. Because again, like we talked about, not so many clear criticisms.
Hmm.
Um, I have the Mareeps and myself in the A minus tier. Um, I'm my draft. I think it could wind up being a lot better, or it could wind up being a lot worse. And so I could just kind of put myself in the middle. Um, what I thought was kind of the middle. Um, and I think it will depend largely on the meta and like how valuable are lower tiers and how offensive is my team really going to end up being, and does it have the defensive staying power to win matches? So that's kind of why I placed myself there. And the Mareeps, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what their team looks like. Hold on, let me pull it up. But um, yeah, I just think there's a little bit of overlap in some areas, and some concerns with hazard removal, which a lot of teams have concerns
Sure.
with, but I think it's
But you have it as your sixth team overall still.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so then kind of afterwards in the B plus tier, I think these are all or like they I did rank them in order of what I thought, but I don't think that it's so I put all of them in the B plus tier instead of spreading them out between B plus and B. I did that for a reason, which is that I think they're all very close in caliber. And they all have their own unique things that I think I'm guessing will hold them back a little bit. Like we talked about, Ben maybe doesn't have the breakers, or at least for me, I think that Hippopotas's team has like a little bit too much overlap. Um, Chris's team, I think I am I don't really understand. I guess maybe I just don't understand the team well enough, and so some of those things I think that kind of led me to this order. So I don't know. That's my order. I think we always see at the end of the season that things are not what we said they were, and I feel like at least the past couple seasons, I feel like I rated you high. And then at the end of the season, I felt like, your team actually wasn't as good as I thought it was.
Yeah.
So I hope I'm not doing that this time, but I did already team build against you. So I think that I feel confident that your team is going to stand the test of time.
Thank you. I I feel like I've had a stretch of teams that I've been excited about and then didn't like, whether it was last season, or all the way back to like Tapu
Your Muse
Bulu,
Aptos.
Camerupt, Muse Zapdos, Aggron. Like, so hopefully this isn't that. So here's mine. Like I said, mine was more based on the grade that I initially gave it, and then I ranked them based on the grades. Starting at the bottom, I thought these were good drafts with some clear criticisms, and I hope that those criticisms were spelled out in our analysis. For the B plus tier, I called these good drafts, um, with maybe one big criticism, but I still kind of like the teams. I rank them accordingly here. These ones honestly were like my hardest three to put in any order because just depending on the hour, I was like, oh no, Magikarp I think is the best B plus, etc. In the A minus, I have strong drafts with minimal criticisms. Um, these ones I'm pretty set with what I think the order is of them, and then for the strong drafts, um, I think I think these are especially over the weekend what I thought the four best teams were. I hate to put my team up there, but I think I had a good draft.
You
It's
drafted it because you thought it was good.
it's easy to draft well when you draft first to get Dragapult. So anyway, this is, and then the S tier is high value pick, multiple win cons, no clear criticisms, and as we always say, like just based on the tier or the rank, it's not like predictive on how well the team will perform during the season. It's just what we think a a coach was able to do during the draft, and maybe only 40% of a win is the team you start with. The other 40% might be playing, and 20% might be the build itself. It's hard to know exactly, but just saying that your tiers, where you are in the tier list, is not necessarily indicative with how well you're due during the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we are in like a little bit of a different meta, with adding some new Pokemon. And so I think that, yeah, there are some unknowns for sure that certain Pokemon I think are going to turn out to be better than we're expecting, and certain new moves, like maybe Steel Roller, is going to totally negate the Grassy Glide, and actually Rillaboom is fine where it's at, you know? Um, so I think there are going to be some things that we learn along the way this season that could shake up how we see these teams by the end.
Cool. Um, any final thoughts?